On the night of August 7, 1942, something impossible happened. A U.S. submarine, hidden off the coast of Japan, surfaced silently. Not to sink a ship, not to fire torpedoes, but to attack land. Minutes later, a Japanese train exploded, its cars twisted in flame and steel. No American soldier had ever attacked the Japanese mainland before, and none would again. This single forgotten mission rewrote naval warfare, a submarine becoming an artillery platform, turning the war upside down for just a few shocking moments. This is the story they never taught you. Before we dive in, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below where you're watching from. It helps this story reach history lovers around the world. By the summer of 1942, the Pacific War was still young, but already brutal. Pearl Harbor had burned. The Philippines had fallen. Japanese forces controlled vast stretches of ocean, island chains, and coastlines. To the American public, Japan felt distant, untouchable, an enemy striking from afar but never struck back at home. Yet, deep beneath the waves, the United States Navy was quietly preparing a response that few believed possible. The submarine USS Barb, SS-2220, was not the largest vessel in the Pacific, nor the most famous. She was a Gato-class submarine, long, narrow, steel-skinned, and designed to kill silently. Her job, like others of her kind, was simple in theory: hunt enemy shipping, cut supply lines, and vanish into the dark. But by mid-1945, after years of war, adaptation, and survival, the Barb had become something else entirely. Her captain, Commander Eugene B. Fluckey, was unconventional, bold, relentlessly curious. He believed submarines were not just underwater ambush predators, but flexible weapons platforms, capable of creativity in war. Fluckey encouraged ideas. He listened to his crew, and one night, that openness sparked a plan no one had ever tried. The USS Barb had been operating aggressively along the Japanese coast, so close that crew members could see lights on shore, fishing villages, and railway lines hugging the shoreline. These railways were critical. They moved troops, coal, ammunition, and supplies between coastal factories and military bases. One evening, as the submarine surfaced briefly to recharge batteries, something caught the crew's attention. A train. It roared past the shoreline, its metal wheels screeching against the tracks, completely unaware that an enemy submarine was watching from the dark sea. Someone joked, half seriously, "What if we could hit that?" In most crews, the idea would have died as a joke. Submarines attacked ships, not trains. Land targets were the domain of bombers and artillery. But Commander Fluckey didn't laugh it off. He paused. Then he asked a dangerous question. Why not? The USS Barb carried a 5-inch deck gun, normally used against small vessels or coastal installations. In theory, it had the range. The problem was accuracy and risk. Surfacing near Japan meant detection, aircraft, shore batteries, and instant destruction if things went wrong. But Fluckey understood something critical. Japan did not expect submarines to attack land. That surprise was their shield. The plan formed quickly. The crew studied charts. They identified a railway line near the island of Karafuto, close enough to shore for the gun to reach, and curved in such a way that a train would slow down. Timing would be everything. They waited. Night fell. The sea calmed. The Barb surfaced quietly, her deck gun crew moving into position under the stars. The submarine drifted, engines barely turning, every man holding his breath. Minutes passed, then, faint at first, a vibration through the water. Steel on steel. The train was coming. No American force had ever attacked the Japanese mainland directly from the sea like this. If they fired, history would change. But so could their fate. Commander Fluckey gave the order. The deck gun swung toward shore. The crew waited for the train to enter the kill zone, and when it did, the night exploded. The order had already been given. On the darkened deck of the USS Barb, The gun crew stood frozen in position, silhouetted against the faint glow of the Japanese coastline. Every sound felt louder than it should have. The creak of metal, the hiss of the sea, the controlled breathing of men who knew they were closer to enemy soil than any American force had ever dared to be. Then the train appeared. Its headlamp cut through the darkness like a blade. Steel wheels thundered along the track, cars swaying as it rounded the coastal curve, exactly where the Barb's crew had predicted it would slow. Commander Eugene Fluckey watched through binoculars. He did not rush the moment. This was not chaos, this was calculation. "Stand by!" The deck gun tracked the moving target. Unlike ships at sea, the train offered no margin for error. One misjudged second, one misaligned shot, and the opportunity would vanish, along with their safety. The train entered the firing zone. Fire. The night shattered. A 5-inch shell roared from the submarine's gun, tearing across the narrow stretch of water and slamming into the rail line with a deafening explosion. The impact was immediate and devastating. Steel screamed. Sparks burst outward like fireworks. The locomotive lurched violently. Before the crew could even react, Fluckey ordered another shot. Then another. Shells ripped into the tracks and rail cars, flipping metal like toys. One car derailed, crashing into another. Flames erupted as fuel ignited. The train, once a symbol of unstoppable movement, was reduced to chaos in seconds. From shore, confusion erupted. Japanese guards scrambled. Alarms rang out too late. No one could comprehend what was happening. A submarine, attacking a train, the USS Barb fired just enough to ensure destruction. And no more. Lingering would mean death. Japanese coastal defenses would respond quickly once the shock wore off. "Cease fire!" The deck crew moved with practiced urgency. The gun was secured. The submarine slipped back into the water, disappearing as silently as it had arrived. By the time Japanese forces reached the wreckage, the Barb was already gone. For Japan, the psychological impact was immediate. This was not just an attack. It was a violation of assumption. The Japanese mainland had been considered largely immune from direct surface attacks, especially from submarines. Air raids were expected. Naval battles were expected. But this suggested something far worse. It meant the enemy could strike anywhere, at any time, without warning. Yet the crew of the USS Barb wasn't finished. Days later, while still patrolling Japanese waters, the submarine crept even closer to shore. This time, Commander Fluckey approved a mission that bordered on the unbelievable. A landing party. 8 volunteers stepped forward, knowing full well that capture would mean execution. Under cover of darkness, they paddled ashore in a rubber boat, carrying a small explosive charge. Their target, the same railway system. Working silently, the sailors buried the charge beneath the tracks and withdrew. Hours later, as another train passed over the line, the device detonated, derailing the train completely. This marked the only known U.S. ground operation on the Japanese home islands during World War II. T2. No firefight, no flag raised, no occupation, just precision, audacity, and disappearance. When the USS Barb returned to base, even American command struggled to believe the reports. A submarine sinking ships was one thing. A submarine destroying trains and landing sailors on enemy soil was something else entirely. The Barb would go on to become one of the most successful submarines of the war, earning a Presidential Unit Citation and turning Commander Fluckey into a legend. But for Japan, the damage went beyond twisted steel. From that night forward, coastal railways were guarded. Resources were diverted. Fear spread quietly through command channels. Because if a submarine could do this once, it could do it again. And somewhere beneath the waves, the USS Barb was already gone, leaving behind only wreckage, questions, and a new understanding of what modern war had become. In the days following the attack, confusion rippled through Japanese command structures. Reports conflicted. Some officers insisted the train derailment had been an accident. Others blamed sabotage. A few, cautiously, mentioned something far more unsettling: a submarine operating within sight of the homeland. That possibility alone was disturbing. For years, Japan's coastal defenses had been designed with a clear enemy in mind: surface fleets and bombers. Submarines were a threat, but one expected to remain offshore, targeting shipping lanes, not land-based infrastructure. The USS Barb shattered that assumption. Railway guards were doubled. Patrols were added along exposed stretches of track. Searchlights scanned the sea at night, sweeping for periscopes that never stayed long enough to be seen. Yet the more Japan tried to close gaps, the more pressure mounted on already strained resources. The psychological weight was heavy. War planners understood something instinctively: physical damage could be repaired, but uncertainty, that was harder to fix. Meanwhile, aboard the USS Barb, life returned to a strange routine. The submarine moved south, stalking shipping lanes once more, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Meals were eaten, maintenance was done. Jokes were exchanged quietly between men who had just rewritten a line of military history. But the crew knew they had crossed an invisible boundary. Commander Eugene Fluckey made a point of it during a brief address to the crew. He did not dramatize the moment. He did not boast. Instead, he reminded them why the mission mattered. Not as spectacle, but as strategy. Surprise, he told them, is a weapon. And few weapons had proven more effective. The Barb's patrol continued with aggressive success. Ships were sunk, escorts were evaded. Each attack reinforced the same message: nowhere was safe anymore. Not even home waters. By this stage of the war, Japan's industrial system was under extreme pressure. Fuel was scarce. Replacement ships were rare. Trained crews were irreplaceable. Every unexpected loss rippled outward, magnifying strain. The train attack may not have destroyed a fleet, but it forced Japan to defend everything. And defending everything meant defending nothing well. Back in the United States, details of the mission remained classified. There were no headlines, no public celebration. The war demanded secrecy, and submarine operations were among the most tightly guarded. Even many naval officers didn't know what the USS Barb had accomplished. Yet within quiet circles, the mission became a case study in unconventional warfare. It demonstrated how creativity, timing, and initiative could stretch the definition of what a weapon and a crew could do. The Barb had proven that submarines were not just hunters beneath the sea. They were psychological disruptors. As the war neared its final phase, Japanese commanders increasingly feared coastal operations. Reports of phantom submarines surfaced repeatedly. Most false, some exaggerated. But the fear was real. One boat had done that. One crew, one night. When the war finally ended, the story of the USS Barb slowly emerged from secrecy. Commander Fluckey would later receive the Medal of Honor, not for a single action, but for a pattern of leadership defined by courage and innovation. Yet even then, the train attack remained a footnote, overshadowed by larger battles, bigger names, and louder explosions. But history has a way of circling back to the details. Today, military historians point to the USS Barb as an example of how wars are often changed not by massive forces, but by small units willing to think differently. 8 men landing on enemy soil, a submarine firing at a train, a nation forced to question its own sense of security. The mission didn't win the war by itself, but it proved something essential: that dominance is not just about power, it's about imagination. And beneath the waves of the Pacific, the USS Barb carried that lesson silently, long before the world was ready to hear it. When World War II finally came to an end, the Pacific grew quiet in ways it hadn't been for years. Ships returned home, submarines surfaced for the last time, and men who had lived months in steel tubes beneath the ocean tried to return to ordinary lives. The USS Barb docked without ceremony. There were no parades for the train that never reached its destination, no speeches for the 8 sailors who had briefly stepped onto enemy soil and vanished again. Their mission remained classified, folded into after-action reports and locked away in archives. History moved on, but the impact of that night never truly faded. In the years after the war, naval strategists began to re-examine what submarines could be. No longer just stealth torpedo platforms, they were now seen as tools of intelligence, disruption, and precision strike. Modern doctrines, special operations insertions, cruise missile launches, covert surveillance, can trace a philosophical lineage back to bold experiments like the USS Barb's mission. A submarine had proven it could shape events without being seen. Commander Eugene B. Fluckey would later reflect on the war with humility. He credited his crew above all else. Their discipline, trust, and willingness to execute ideas that seemed impossible. Leadership, he believed, was not about rank, but about creating space for initiative. That belief saved lives. Every unconventional success reduced the length of patrols. Every psychological blow forced the enemy to overextend defenses. Every surprise shortened the war, by inches perhaps. But inches mattered. For Japan, the train attack became a quiet reminder of vulnerability. It showed that even the homeland was not untouchable, that the war had truly become global, that the sea, once a shield, could turn into a doorway. Yet the story of the USS Barb endures not because of destruction, but because of restraint. The crew fired only what was necessary. They withdrew immediately. They avoided civilian areas. The mission was focused, deliberate, and limited. Designed to disrupt infrastructure, not terrorize a population. That distinction matters. It is what allows the story to be remembered not as cruelty, but as calculated wartime innovation. Today, the USS Barb is preserved in memory, not myth. Her record, sinking more enemy ships than nearly any other U.S. submarine, is impressive. But her most unusual achievement remains that single night when a train vanished into fire, and the rules of naval warfare bent just enough to reveal something new. War is often remembered through massive invasions and decisive battles. But sometimes, history turns on quieter moments. A coastline in the dark, a train running on schedule, a submarine waiting just offshore. No speeches were made that night. No flags were raised. Only the echo of a gunshot across the water, and the understanding that the impossible had just happened. If you found this story compelling, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves history. And tell us in the comments, what other forgotten moments of World War II should we explore next? Because some of the most powerful stories are the ones almost lost to time.